Hi, I'll be doing my first VBA code demonstration in class today, but I'll be using a spreadsheet that I've already created. And what I want to do is now show you how to create a Excel VBA application from scratch. And there's some fundamental things that you need to know in order to do your project that won't be demonstrated in class. So if I launch Excel and create a blank workbook, you'll notice that I have a developer tab that shows up here, and by default that's not installed in Excel. So in order to configure that, you need to go to the File pull-down menu and select Options, and then from the navigation bar over here choose Customize Ribbon, and then you're going to find a checkbox for developer right here. Go ahead and check that. OK, get out of it, and you should find the developer tab. So once the developer tab is showing up, then you can click on it, switch to the developer page, and you'll see that you've got a toolbar that's designed for anyone developing VBA applications. So you're going to see in class today that there is a underlying program language called Visual Basic for applications, and a lot of people don't use it. Most people don't use it. I have not used it very extensively. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but I have played around with it and I know what it is, and I'm going to show you perhaps enough to make you dangerous, but nevertheless I'll show you how you access that feature in Excel. And having some programming background, you should, with a introduction, be able to figure out a lot of things, and develop those skills if that's something that you're interested in. So I have a worksheet that's open. I'm on the developer page. The next thing I'm going to do is click on the Visual Basic button on the toolbar, and the screen's going to transform into something that looks somewhat like Visual Studio, I suppose, in that I have a designer window, I have Project Explorer and a property window. Okay, so Project Explorer is going to be very similar to Solution Explorer. It's going to, every time I add a new object to the application, it's going to show up here, and I can navigate back and forth, between them. So if I want to create a form, which is what I want to show you, is how to create a new form, I will select from this tool, and you're going to see a form appear that's scalable. You're going to see a toolbox that floats, and I'm not sure, you may be able to anchor that toolbox. I just haven't done it, so I'm just going to park it over here, and I'll create a very simple program, let's say a hello world program, and I will make it display a message upon a button click. So go ahead and drag a command button over here. Now, this is familiar to most of you. There is a default caption on the button face. Okay, so if this were C#, for instance, you would know to go to at design time, you'd know to go to the property window and change the text property. There is no text property in this case, in this language, but there is a caption property, which is the same thing. And if you double click on the property name, it should highlight the corresponding property value, at which point you can put something in here like greet me, hit the enter key, and again I've made a design time change here. So what do I need to do to make this functional? Well, follow your instincts, I guess, and double click on the button. It's going to transform from the designer view to a code window, and it's going to build the the skeletal outline of a private void method, event method. And you'll notice that in Visual Basic the syntax is going to be a little bit different in that it doesn't say private void, it says private sub. That's a throwback to years gone by in an ancient language called Fortran. Essentially the equivalent of a private method was called a subroutine, and if it were a void type private method, called a function if it was a return type private method. So a lot of the syntax is derived from a language that was developed at Dartmouth College in 1964 called BASIC, and BASIC itself was derived from a much older language called Fortran that was developed back in 1954. So the syntax between Fortran and BASIC very, very similar, and you're going to see, you know, that kind of legacy continue here with VBA. Now, I programmed in, you know, both of those languages, so I'm not shocked. And but if you've never programmed in BASIC or Fortran, you know, if a C-based language is what you're totally what you're familiar with, then, you know, this might seem a little weird to you. All right, so in here I'm going to go ahead and put the focus on the worksheet right here. And you can see that I type very quickly. All right, so all this is doing is activating that sheet. Now, it's possible to, on this workbook, it is going to activate sheet 1, which is the single default sheet that is created anytime I create a blank Excel spreadsheet. It's possible to add additional sheets in Excel, and therefore if I want to navigate from one underlying worksheet to another, I simply execute the same statement but provide a different argument here. Okay, so that argument is going to be the name of the worksheet as it appears on the lower left part of the window when you're using Excel. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. All right, so that just puts the focus on that particular underlying worksheet, at which point if I want to store something in that worksheet, like hello world, then I can reference the cells object, and got to remember the syntax here. So the cells object then will have two arguments that need to be provided, and the one is the row coordinate, or the row coordinate, followed by the column coordinate. So if I want to store something in row 1, column A, then index value 1 here references the row, and a 1 here references the column, and the leftmost column would be column 1, so column A. So I'm really referencing cell A1 at this point. And if I want to assign something to it, it has a value property, and again I can assign with the assignment operator. And if I want to assign, you know, hello world, I can do it in that fashion. Okay, don't put semicolons at the end of the statements, and let's try running it. So at this point I believe I've entered in everything I need to. I'm going to double click back here on the form and try running it. So I've got a run button up here on the toolbar. You'll see that it is now in run mode. The button's active. I can invoke its click event method, and you'll see in the underlying spreadsheet, sheet 1, I've now assigned a string value to cell A1. Okay, so I wasn't really planning to do much with this program other than to show you how to configure an Excel spreadsheet so that you get the developer tools, and I wanted to show you then how to start out a project so that, you know, even though I'm not going to demonstrate that in class, you'll know how to get going. I'm going to stop this. I'm going to do one more thing, and I'm going to go to Project Explorer, and notice the name of the form by default is User Form 1. Okay, that'll be important to know here in a second. I'm going to go ahead in Project Explorer and double click on this workbook, and I'm going to get a new designer window, and I've got a pull down menu here where I can choose a different option, that being workbook, and when I do, it provides me with something that is roughly equivalent to a form load event if you were programming in Visual Studio. So if I want this graphical user interface to appear immediately when I open up the worksheet, which is likely that you may want to do that, then I can use a statement like this. Okay, so the name of the form is User Form 1. It has a show method. Notice you get some IntelliSense along the way here, which is handy, especially if you're, you know, like me and don't program in this language very much. And now if I save, it's going to want to attempt to save as a workbook, and I'll have a problem saving it that way. What I'm going to have to do is save it a little bit differently as a Excel macro enabled template. So I'll go ahead and make that selection, navigate to wherever it is I need to be. Call this example 0 VBA. Save, close up out of here, close up my worksheet, and I think what I'm going to do before I close up that worksheet is to go ahead and clear out this cell, because I'm going to open this back up again and I'll run it one more time. So clear the cell, do a save, and now I'm going to navigate to that folder, and there's my spreadsheet. You'll notice a slightly different icon is being used, and when I open it, I may get this button that forces me to manually enable the content. Okay, so it's a security warning because this contains embedded code. And when I do, it opens up into the graphical user interface immediately. And there you have it. So as a convenience, you can have that graphical user interface pop up as soon as the spreadsheet's opened. All right, that will do it for this demonstration. I think you know everything you need to start creating a project from scratch. And then again later on today, I'll be doing a code walkthrough of a spreadsheet that contains VBA code that goes into far more detail than this one did.